Hello guys, my name is Dale and I'm going to show you the setup that I use to create Blender renders with The Sims. So all I use is two programs. I use the SimsFo Sim Ripper from Mod The Sims and I use Blender. I'll put them both in the description below. So what you want to start with is opening the SimsFo Sim Ripper. Once it's open, you just need to go to your save game file that has your sim. Then if you sort it by first name, it's always easier to find the sim you're looking for. For me, of course, it's Derek. Once you have your sim, you want to make sure he looks exactly how you left him in the game. Make sure that clean day mesh is selected and that the blender bone size is 9. If you want to change his outfit, you just click here, change it to whatever you want, make sure that his skin is set to normal. So we want to export as .day, as that is what has the skeleton. Put the model somewhere easy to remember, close the program, go to where you exported and make sure that his diffuse, his normal map and his specular is there. Copy the folder location so that it's easy to get to in Blender and then open Blender. If it's your first time opening Blender, you'll also have a cube and a light. If you just select them both and delete them, then what you want to do is File, Import, .day, paste the folder location and press Enter. But first make sure that all of the units and options are unchecked. Import. So what I like to do is create the windows with which I'm going to be working with. So down here, between the two windows, if you hover your mouse over, the cursor will turn into a symbol with two arrows. If you right click, select vertical split, and drop the line somewhere around here. In the top left of the newly created window, if you select the drop-down menu and change it to Shader Editor, this will stay empty until we select our Sim's model. Let's get a closer look. You hold down the middle mouse button and move your mouse. Scroll to zoom in and out and hold Shift with the middle mouse button to change the direction. In the top right, if we, underneath the scene collection, select the lamp and delete, and now if we were to press Shift and C, the camera will center around Derek. So now we want to make him look like he does in The Sims. The easiest way to do this, pretty simply, is to change the viewport renderer up here. So if you click viewport shading, you will now see Derek with his textures. However, he still doesn't look exactly right, a bit shiny. If we select him, this window that we created now has things in it. If we select the specular map down here and drag the color node into the specular node in the middle section, he slowly starts to become less shiny. However, if you're using a model that has alpha textures, you need to drag this node that says alpha down into the alpha node just there. Then what this will do will tell Blender that it is transparent. However, it won't render transparent until we tell the render to do so. Keep Derek selected, and down here on the right panel, if you select the material properties, and underneath settings, you'll see blend mode and shadow mode. If you change both of these to alpha hashed, your model, if it's alpha CC, should now have correct alpha properties. Back into the shader editor, underneath the principled BSDF, which is the green thing, normally I like to set these to 0. However, the roughness will determine how shiny the specular map is. The default model has a shiny specular to his hair. And because we've put the viewport display on, which has a default HDRI, when we turn the roughness down, we'll start to see that. So what I like to do is I normally like to leave that at 0.5 or at 1. So I imagine you're wondering, what are these giant things sticking out of your sim? Well, these are the bones. And these are pretty important when you want to create a render. If you select them, and then move over here to the object data properties, and then underneath the viewport display, if you drop that down, and select in front, now you get to see all of the bones. So up here in the top left, there's a drop-down menu underneath object mode. If you click that and select pose mode, now you'll be able to select each of these bones individually. So I've selected his spine. So on this drop-down menu here, if I select rotate, then click anywhere on the bone and start to move it with my mouse, you'll see that Derek is now rotating. So a little trick I like to do with the bones is to change the transformation orientation. So by default, it's on global, but what I like to do is switch it to local. So what this does is it follows the axes of the bone's local space. So instead of following it from the angle we're looking at, Derek, it will actually follow the bone. As you can see here on the arm, if we were to move now the Z axis, you can see that it moves more realistically versus if we were to move the Z axes on the global. So once you've posed your sim exactly how you want them, you now need to create the scene. So the first thing I always like to add and then build my composition around is the camera. So in this window where Derek is, if you hold Shift A, move down to camera, it will create a camera for you to use in the scene. An easy way to see what the camera looks like, if you press 0 and then press Shift F, you now have control of the camera. So like any FPS game, you can now move with WASD. So what I like to do is set up the frame using this. So what I want to do over in output properties is change the resolution. So I want this to be vertical. So if I change this to 180 and then this to 120, it gives us more of the setup that I want. So what I like to do so that I'm not distracted by the rest of the workflow is to select the camera, go to the camera object data properties, and then in viewport display, change the passepartout to 1. So now I know exactly what it is that I'm working with. So from this, we can now start to play with the render settings. So over here, underneath render properties, we can start to play with the things that will make this stand out from the Sims. So one of my favorite things to use is ambient occlusion. Instantly, when I turn this on, it will make a huge difference. So you can change the settings and mess around with them just here, but I like to leave them as default. You can also play with bloom, screen space reflections if you've got any reflective surfaces, and if you're creating animations, you can use motion blur. But importantly, what we need to do here is underneath film, we need to tick transparent. So all we then need to do is import the image into an external program like Photoshop, and it will be a layer that is separated from a background. So now let's start creating some lights. So before we're able to see any lights that we add to the scene, we need to change one property. So if you click the down arrow here for the shading properties and tick scene lights. This way, any lights that we add to the scene, we can see them instantly. So again, if we press Shift A, but this time underneath light, add a point light. So let's select move, grab the point bulb, move it up and then forward a little bit, and you can see it's already lighting the scene. What we can do now is if we click the light properties over here, underneath shadow, turn on context shadows, you can already start to see on the model itself, it's starting to cast a more detailed shadow. In these properties here, you can play with any color you want, any intensity you like, play with the specular, how accurate the diffuse is, and if you want shadows at all. An important thing to remember when creating renders is the 3-point rule. You always want a fill light, a backlight, and a side light, no matter the scene. Instead of adding a new light using Shift A, we can simply duplicate this light by pressing Shift D. Press Enter once you've pressed Shift D. Now we can move this light on its own and the other light is still there. And we'll choose this light to be the backlight. So what we'll do is we'll put this behind Derek, simply just using the arrows, and we'll make this one really intense. So what I like to do is often use this camera angle to see exactly how the lights will be. So what I want to do is click shading and turn the strength of the world light down, 0.25. If we add then a sunlight, this is a global light, so no matter where it is on your scene, it will always affect the models as if it was a sun in the sky. Use the rotate tool, we can pretend we are the sun's direction and move it exactly where we want it to be. Creating rim lights, my favorite in fact. So we'll have one there, and we'll make this one a nice orange color and make this one a nice blue. Then if we make the fill light a little bit softer, maybe a blue, and then the backlight can be a strong orange. Hide the gizmos and the overlays. You can see a little preview of what the render would actually look like when it exports. So we want to make sure that the compression is 0. It's RGBA so that the alpha is written, and that the color depth is 8. There's no need for 16 color depth. Under color management, we want it to follow the scene. So if we go back to the scene, and underneath color management, we change filmic to standard, and we switch look to none. This way, exactly what you see here is exactly what will be exported. So normally what you do is click render image. However, the way I use Blender is using the viewport renderer rather than the actual rendering machine. So what I often do is have to click view and viewport render image. So what I like to do is click viewport render image, and instantly, because it's such a small file size, the image has been rendered. And there he is. So to save this image, save as, we make sure that the compression is 0 and we save. And there he is, Derek.